So as you can see on the screen, I have created a new diagram or scale or template or whatever you want to call it. And it's basically an attempt to put the scale of consciousness into a larger context. And in this video I'm going to talk about what this is about and describe and talk about these different descriptions and try to make sense of the whole thing. And the first thing to notice is that the scale now goes from minus 1000 to 0, and 0 is the highest level of enlightenment, which is the opposite of what you might be used to from my other videos, which you should watch before this to get background on the scale. And the reason for this is that, in my view, it's much more accurate to have a scale of consciousness that goes from minus to 0. Because 0 represents the highest level of consciousness. It's your true nature is nothingness. It's being a nobody, basically. So the spiritual journey is always from being less than your true self to finding back to your true self. That's the whole thing. That's the whole journey. And the scale from 1 to 1000, which is the regular scale most people, teachers use, is kind of misleading, because it might make people think that you have to add something to yourself to become more than you are, and not less. It creates a different perspective when you have to understand that you're actually going from minus to 0. Because 0 is the highest you can go, because nothingness is the great equalizer. Because when you find that you're nothingness, that you are empty, because nothingness cannot be better or worse. It can only be itself. It can only be what it is, which is nothingness, emptiness. And everybody can reach that and be the same emptiness, the same nothingness, the same consciousness. So that's the great equalizer. And everybody's true nature is obviously that 0 point. But surrounding it is a black circle, as you see on the screen. And this black circle represents the core issues that swarms around the center of your true self. And these core issues, they are created usually basically from birth and the first very formative years of your life, before you can even remember anything. They are created as you come from like a pure drop of spirit from heaven. You blend with the polluted mass consciousness of this planet, and then you take up stuff from your parents and from the mass consciousness, and that creates the core issues, which surrounds and blocks the true self to a large degree. And obviously these core issues will vary a lot, or at least a little bit, from person to person, and at least in degree. Some will have really severe and a bigger black circle. Some will have a smaller black circle. But everybody basically you cannot escape not being born and not having core issues like that. And these are the core issues that make people feel deep down that they're not worth anything. They don't have self-worth. They're not even worthy to exist. That's what many people feel. Basically everyone feel that at some level, even though not consciously. And this leads to all sorts of compensations. Some will compensate by trying to be more, like, they will grow a big bodybuilding, they will create a big career life where they get super good top jobs all the time and be rich and all that stuff. There are many ways to compensate for this inner lack of self-worth and power and feeling like you're eternally worthy, which you would feel like if you actually didn't have all these issues surrounding the actual core self. And obviously you also have the opposite reaction, in which people become self-destructive because of these core issues, and they feel that they are less worth than everybody, and they seek out situations where they get abused in different ways. This is the opposite from those who overcompensate by trying to exercise more and as much power and force in the world as they can. So there are as many individual ways to handle this as there are people. But overall, it's those two strategies, which basically your whole personality structure is built upon, because the personality structure is built layer upon layer, and with these core issues as the fundament of the whole thing. So you can say that the whole personality structure is a big coping mechanism trying to protect yourself from having to feel these core issues, because it feels horrible to feel that you have no worth at all, that you are worthless. And it's like layers upon layers of armor that blocks these core issues from being touched. But it's very different from different people. Some people can easily get their core issues touched by the slightest remark, and they will lose their shit, and you will see they get into rage, and they will usually attack either physically or verbally. And that's when you see people's eyes turn black. If their core issues are touched, it inflames the whole being, and they will not remember. They will have a blackout, and they will react so strongly that they have a blackout when it happens. And some people are much more difficult to touch, to have their core issues touched. It depends a lot on the personality structure and many things. So that's how it works on that fundamental level, and then you have all the layers upon layers of mind stuff or personality stuff built upon that, and that creates the whole scale of consciousness, as you can see illustrated with different colors. So everybody starts somewhere on the minus side of the scale on their journey in life, as you take in the negativity from parents and mass consciousness and everything, and your surroundings, and then your job or the journey, the spiritual journey, or up the scale again of finding back to your true self, your true center again. It's basically just getting rid of all the stuff, all the baggage that you gathered in your unconscious, or those years you were brought up, and those years you in a pre-adulthood basically. So as you have a turning point in your life, you become somewhat conscious that something is not right, and you start to dig and try to find out. And then if you're lucky, you come to the conclusion that it's something with you, not the world, that's wrong, even though the world also obviously is a reflection of everybody's big problems. But you understand at some point that you have to take responsibility for your mind. That's the best you can do. And you start the spiritual journey up the scale. And the spiritual journey, or the journey up the scale, is there's nothing to learn, there is nothing to understand in that sense. It's basically stripping away layers upon layers of accumulated usually negative, or at least not really you energies that have attached to you, or belief systems. You could call belief systems the same as an energy, because it generates an emotional charge, which again generates the thoughts that you usually are conscious about. And those thoughts will be a mess, because you will have so many energies when you start out on the journey that you will have like thousands of thoughts, like a chaotic mess in the beginning. I mean, you start to look into it, the chaos will even increase, because stuff is coming up at the same time. But when you start healing or getting rid of certain emotional charges, and these will usually, and you do that by accepting the emotion, the negative emotion, or whatever it is, pain, accepting it fully and letting it go, and then it will usually drag along with it the root, which is some kind of belief that you held that was not really you. And that's the whole process. It's basically just stripping away layers upon layers of energies. And these energies will be very obviously negative in the beginning. If you start, let's say, level minus 900 or something down in the red zone, and then it becomes more and more subtle the higher you go on the scale. It's like a big washing machine, a big cosmic washing machine. That's how your life works, because as you find yourself on this minor scale somewhere, you will always go round and around in circles, kind of, or at least the issues will go around and around. And that means that your whatever issues you have at that certain level, which is sort of the outer layer of the onion, those issues will repeat, or those situations will repeat and repeat until you get it. And by getting it, that means that you recognize something is going on here, something is repeating, my higher mind is trying to tell me something. And then you sort of, you respond differently, you start to become conscious, and you respond to whatever happens instead of just reacting automatically like you might have done before. You will sort of become conscious of the situation, and then you will get some kind of acceptance or realization that lets go of that older level that you are processing at that point, and then that when that level is gone, you're moving on to the next level. You're basically peeling the onion layer by layer down to nothingness. And each level obviously comes with different, overall lessons, which usually are more subtle the higher you go. And that's basically it. So there's nothing to learn. You don't need to read any books. If you do all these things correctly, and you don't hold on to stuff that you want to let go of, then you will move up the scale. And the best way to do it is to follow the formula of acting on your highest excitement, because that's how the higher mind guides you into the least resistance way of doing all this. So if you act on your highest excitement, you will get into situations in which you get the opportunity to let go of stuff that's been reflected back to you from the higher mind by putting you in these situations, and it will repeat those situations for you until you get the so-called lesson. And that's how it goes all the way. And the negativity is also part of these lessons. Obviously, you will have a lot of. It's hard to avoid having suffering, even if you're following the formula, and you will probably. It's possible, but it's really hard to avoid suffering in this, as this world has been, because of all the negativity. So the big black circle on the outside is basically fourth density, which has been negatively charged, you could say. It's been fourth density service to self-oriented. But now we are cleaning. The whole mission of ascension is about cleaning up. First and foremost, the mass consciousness must be cleaned up, but that happens not only with ET assistance, but also by as many people as possible cleaning up their own act at the same time. Which is what we have been doing for a number of years on this planet now, and we are coming to a head in the near future about this whole mission. But anyway, the mass consciousness is, as you can see, is a big black circle with white dots or white inside. It should probably be more white than black at this point, because we are beyond 50% positive. That happened in 2012. So now the mass consciousness is actually up into the high 400s. And but I didn't. The illustration is just what it is. It's not an accurate illustration, but I tried to make it with these white dots, so you could see there's black and there's white, there's light and there's darkness still. It's a mix. So the mass consciousness has been very negative. And the higher minds and oversoul level, of the higher mind, which is your full self, which always remains in fifth density or in heaven or the afterlife realms. So the higher mind is your full self. You are a spirit that has been incarnating in the physical body and whatnot, and you are part of the your own full self, which is the higher mind that's guiding you through the incarnation that you planned with the higher mind before you came here, in linear terms. But the higher minds, they have to work through this layer of a negative mass consciousness. So that means that, you know, the negativity also has an organizing principle, just like the higher minds are the organizing principles that are in charge of, you know, of each person has their own higher mind, and each higher mind is part of an oversoul. So that's sort of the situation, how it works. And then the negative collective ego, as I call it, that's a fourth density kind of entity. It's not like the higher mind exactly, but it's kind of like an organizing principle for the planet, the planetary consciousness. But it has been very negatively charged because of all the negativity that's been going on and accumulating in this reality. So it's been like a collective Lucifer, as I call it here. Although that is now changing. We are in the middle of changing all that. The collective Lucifer is now in its death throes, and it's really lashing out and making desperate moves, which is why you see all the craziness in the world right now. So the higher minds are always in charge, but they also have to allow the collective negative ego to express itself and do things. But they will never allow negativity that's not meant to happen, at least not in a large scale degree. You know, it can, I don't know how exactly detail it works, but it can probably be stuff that happens. But overall, the higher minds are in charge, and they will allow the negativity to express itself, to create situation in which people can learn. So that's kind of how you could say that. You could say that God is always in charge in a sense, but the devil is living inside God and God's body, and is allowed to express himself too, but only on the terms set by God. So that's how overall the whole situation works, as far as I can tell. So the negativity is used in a positive way by the higher minds, you could say, and you can also use it in a positive way in your own life. It's up to you how you view a so-called event. You can view anything that happens negatively or positively. It's just a perspective. And if you want to grow in consciousness, it's always a good idea to try to twist your perspective around, so that whatever happens actually serves your journey. So that pretty much explains the micro and the macro cosmos, or of the scale, and how these things work. And as I said before, you go around in circles, and I call these circles. You can call them karmic grooves. And it's very possible to be stuck in the same circle for lifetimes, or at least a whole life, not moving much, not learning anything, not, recognizing any pattern, just going around and meeting the same wall every time, getting the same negative experience, not changing your perspective, not letting go of anything. Then you would just be stuck. So the cosmic washing machine is something you need to work with, otherwise it will not work so good. It will still try to clean you up, but you better work with it as consciously as possible to efficiently get up the scale. And this is also how you create the pathless path, because when you're stuck in a karmic groove and going around in circles, you will be an individual expression of that groove, but many people have gone in similar grooves. And, that's why you can recognize all these different types of people. they're just stuck in some karmic groove, and they're going round and round, playing that part, playing that role, doing their stuff in that particular level. But if you're on the pathless path, that means you're moving from groove to groove. So maybe you just go halfway around in a circle, or maybe you just need to go one time around and then you move on to the next level, or maybe you just move on to the next level after much quicker. So that then you create, on the scale you can see, you create like a pathless path because it's completely unique to you. It's not so unique when you go round and around in the same groove, but if you move to groove all the way up to level 0, you have carved out a very unique path that nobody else has gone. And this is also why the enlightened teacher, they are so different, because all of them had, even though they are expressions of the same level of consciousness, they all came to it from a very unique path, which made them into the most unique expression of themselves that they can be in physical form. So it's not being all one and all, being one with all and everything. It's not really about being the same. Quite the opposite, actually. You become an extremely individual expression of it, because your path will be so unique. So these days, it's the whole mission has been to clean up the mass consciousness, and healing the core issues is a major deal for that many people will have to go through. As far as I was told, when I went through my eye of the needle experience more than 1.5 years ago now, I guess it was, I actually healed my core issues, and I'm still integrating it. It's like you're pulling the plug. The core issues are healed, you're pulling the plug, and the rest of your issues that are built on top of that, they're still circling the drain, trying to be cleansed out, but it takes time. And but at some point, I'm guessing I will collapse into the higher levels. I'm still below non-duality. But you pull the plug, and at some point you collapse into some kind of enlightenment level, and then you can sort of purify yourself even more in a very subtle way, all the way to complete level 0 or level 1000 on the regular scale. So the core issues is something that I think a lot of people will have to clean up, because we need that to happen before we can have the event which sort of blasts the whole mass consciousness with amazing love bomb or light bomb that will create a whole new reality and establish the mass consciousness above in the levels of unconditional love, which is a plateau level for even higher levels later for the whole of humanity and the mass consciousness. It will go much higher than unconditional love in the future, probably all the way up to close to full enlightenment as a planetary civilization and as a mass consciousness, but that will take some more time. Probably towards year 2050, like we've done. At that point, we will be really high level as a civilization and as a mass consciousness, but it will be a bit of a bumpy ride for some more years, at least until we hit the event, which is a kind of a breakthrough. But to have that breakthrough, I think we need a lot of people to clean or heal their core issues, and then some kind of thing will be triggered, and a lot of people will be receptors of that explosion of consciousness, be ready for it, and then it will have a mass effect, which will be like almost like a nuclear bomb of light and love surrounding the whole planet and spreading into the mass consciousness. And the fourth density needs to be cleaned up pretty good before we can merge into it, because we are moving from 3D to 4D, or third density to fourth density. And the fourth density is kind of like it's the dream reality. is less physical. So we are going to merge what we see as the physical reality with a less physical version. So it will be a half-half kind of situation. And when I was in my peak levels, I have experienced fourth densities, at least have a peek inside what it will look like and feel like. I had that in like peak Satori experiences several times. And it's going to be a very different reality, to put it that way. And definitely something that is going to be exciting and very much more peaceful and in harmony with the cosmos and with the nature and with people than we have now, obviously, because now we're in the end time madness and craze, because the dying collective Lucifer is going crazy, because he knows basically the game is up, but he's trying his best, lurking in every dark corner that is left, and trying his best to lash out and create negativity through everybody who still are in his hooks. And basically, if you have core issues, that's the entrance point for the collective negative to sort of use you or come into you and use you as a vessel of negativity or an agent of the matrix, kind of. In the matrix, anybody can turn into, become an agent at any time. At least all the unconscious people walking around in the matrix. It's the same here. If you have core issues, you're still attached to the matrix, even if you're high level. And even if you're in the 500s, which I was when I healed my core issues. You're still hooked into the matrix, and the agents or the collective negative can still work through you, because you have these core issues that sort of respond. They vibrationally correspond to the negativity in the collective. And obviously, everybody's individual core issues are actually creating the collective negative ego, or the collective Lucifer. So a certain percentage of people will have to deal or go through the eye of the needle experience and heal the core issues. And then we will see what happens. But I think hopefully this will happen within the next couple of years. 2023 is the target year, as far as Bashar has talked about lately. And I believe they wanted to do it in 2020, but it got postponed for different reasons. Because I went through it late 2019, actually November 2019, I went through the experience, and they told me that millions of people would have to go through the same. And that didn't really happen, as far as I know. I haven't told anybody else at this point. So I'm just hoping that it will happen in 2023, as we know it now looks like the next target year is. And I will obviously use this diagram and model in future videos also to talk about different issues. It presents a good overview. So then we have, a new way, a new perspective of seeing the whole scale in a bigger context.